All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Kerry Kincannon. I'm a current member of the Board of Directors. And on behalf of the Board, Council, and Executive Office, I'd like to welcome everyone to our second virtual town hall of 2019. We're very happy that you could join us today for our discussion topic, how you can help NACADA help you to support student success. As many of you are aware, the core of NACADA's mission is to promote student success through advancing academic advising globally. Our professional development offerings are crucial to advancing this mission, so the board was excited to have a chance to bring them to the front and center of our community conversation today. I'm joined today by a group of amazing colleagues that I'm going to have introduce themselves before we get going. So let's go ahead and start with Brody.
Good day, everybody from the University of Southern Indiana. Happy to join you all today.
Aloha, everyone. I'm Megumi Makino Kanehiro from the University of Hawaii at Manoa.
Hi, everyone. I'm Karen Archambault. I'm from Rowan College at Burlington County in New Jersey.
Hi, everybody. I'm Deb Dotterer from Michigan State University, and I'm currently serving as the chair of the Professional Development Committee.
Excellent. And our good thoughts today are with our colleague Terry Farr, who was hoping to join us, but she's had a family situation arise. So good thoughts to you, Terry. So what you're going to see next is an agenda for today. In a minute, Megumi will offer an overview of the topic. Then our panel will have a chance to share some thoughts. And then we'll open up to the community discussion for questions and comments from you all. And then after that, we'll wrap up and talk about next steps. So before I hand off to Megumi, I want to note a few things. Please note that the event webpage highlights future virtual town halls that we have on slate for later in the year. You'll see the URL for this site on the slide on the screen now, and you can also get there from the virtual town hall announcement that you got on your email. We're recording this event for future viewing by those who were unable to join us in real time today. The event webpage contains a link to a Google form that we'll keep open for about the next 3 weeks or so. That form provides space for participants to offer comments, questions, and feedback. For those of you currently watching the event live, please note that the Zoom platform has a Q&A button that you'll find at the bottom center of the frame. At any point during today's proceedings, we invite you to submit comments or questions via this Q&A function. Your comments and your questions will drive our conversation later in the event, so they are most welcome. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Megumi.
Just to provide a little context for today's virtual town hall, student success is at the core of both NACADA's vision and mission statements. NACADA's mission statements states that NACADA promotes student success by advancing the field of academic advising globally. We provide opportunities for professional development, networking, and leadership for our diverse membership. In order for us to be the best advisors we can be for our students, we provide service to the organization, and we also provide professional development opportunities in a reciprocal relationship. This is necessary since, as many of you know, we are an organization made up largely of volunteers. Today's format of looking at both aspects, that of professional development offerings and support, and reciprocal opportunities available to members as professional development consumers, as well as gaps in professional development or service offerings that NACADA can look to fill, came out of the town hall format that was successfully used in Ireland this past summer for our international conference. Next slide, please. Specifically today, we hope to address 3 learning outcomes. You will hear from current leaders on the status of professional development efforts. You will hear about the Professional Development Committee's progress on a gap analysis project. And of course, as is the main focus with town halls, we would like to hear from you. Any questions, comments, and suggestions via the Zoom Q&A function. Next slide, please. The strategic goals were developed in light of NACADA's mission and vision in service to student success. Today's town hall specifically addresses strategic goal number 2, which is to provide professional development opportunities that are responsive to the needs of advisors and advising administrators, and number 6, to engage in ongoing assessment of all facets of the association.
So Megumi, thank you so much for setting that up for me. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm Karen Archambault, and I currently serve as the president of the association. And I think strategic goal 2 in particular is incredibly important to me, to the board, and to the association as a whole. We're essentially in strategic goal 2, while it speaks to us providing professional development opportunities, what it's really speaking to is how the association helps advisors get to the how of student success. So how do we move students to being closer to graduation, to closer to their goals, to finding the life ahead of them that is meaningful in a way beyond what sometimes folks think of as advising in terms of course selection. So when we all were looking as a board and looking at strategic goal 2 again in particular, we really were thinking about the wide range of needs of our advisors, our advising administrators, and our membership more broadly. And I think when I think about this, I think about the nature of what we tell our students. We tell our students that the way to get to graduation, the way to be retained, is to become involved, to become engaged in your organization, in your institution. 2 students side by side in their first year at your institution, the one who connects with someone or something at the institution is more likely to make it to graduation than the one who remains isolated. And so I think about that as translating into what we do with NACADA. If we think of ourselves as we think of our students, engagement is key to our success. Finding the ways in which we can serve the institution, whether it is as a user of professional development or as a volunteer in developing that professional development. The same is true for us as members as it is for our students, and maybe even more so in this association because so many of our students do depend on us to help them find their paths to student success. In some ways, this is our way of taking care of ourselves in order to take care of our students. So with that said, I'm going to hand it off to Deb to speak a little bit about what we've done so far and what comes next.
Thanks, Karen. In 2017, the NACADA board charged the Professional Development Committee with looking at a gap analysis after we had just completed the core competencies. Thanks, Lee. They charged the board with a gap analysis to review what offerings are provided by the organization and to determine what needs to be provided to support you in your development and support you in helping your students gain the success that they can have at each of your institutions. The last review of a type like this was done back in 2007, and that was a significant size difference of an organization from the time we are then versus now. We've grown considerably, and so it's time to do this analysis again and get and obtain feedback from the membership on what the organization is providing in support of their professional development. In 2018, the PDC's plan for conducting the gap analysis was approved. And we are starting to move forward on that work. We've identified several mechanisms for collecting information on what members feel that NACADA should provide as an organization. Professional developments were the focus of one of the discussion groups at the town hall meeting during the 2018 annual conference. And then PDC also collaborated with the regional review work group to determine text in specific questions that they were asking that would also provide the PDC with additional information from the members that responded to that survey. Currently, the Gap Analysis Committee, the subcommittee, is reviewing the data accessible to us at this time. For a majority of the events NACADA conducts, we include a question in the feedback/evaluation form for the event that addresses it asks members to what future events would you like to see, what future opportunities would you like to see NACADA provide to you. And so this is a great opportunity for us to go back to events we've had over the past 3 years and gather that information from that particular feedback question, as well as gathering data at the annual conference town hall meeting. So we're reviewing that feedback, and additionally, the regional review survey. In the end, the PDC will submit a report to the NACADA Board of Directors going forward. So we really want you to take advantage of these opportunities to provide us for feedback in any way you can. I know the Regional Review Committee will be doing focus groups at regional meetings. Encourage that participation. We'll also be doing virtual focus groups. Today is a great opportunity for those of you participating to provide us any feedback you may have also. Thanks, and I will turn it back over to Karen.
Actually, I think I'm going. So that's what I love about these virtual town halls, right? That's okay. Nothing is perfect, right? The best laid plans. We're all learning today, which is wonderful. So I want to go back to some of Karen's comments in terms of thinking about the association like we think about our work with students. I think that's a great way to kind of view involvement within the association. And to that end, the Professional Development Committee had an extensive project a few years ago to delineate the core competencies for advising, right? We think about students' involvement and building a kind of a framework or kind of a roadmap, so to speak, in terms of the core competencies. And the pocket guide that you saw on the screen earlier was given to all those that attended the 2017 conference in St. Louis. It's also now available for purchase through the NACADA website. You can see the 3 components of the core competencies there. And we've had a couple of webinars to focus in on that. There have been some presentations. So I don't want to go through the core competencies specifically, but many of these content areas provide advisors the knowledge and skills to be effective guides for their students, right? To achieve excellence in their work, regardless of the specifics of the individual campus advising missions, all advisors have to understand all 3 components and be able to synthesize and apply them as needed in academic advising interactions. The 3 components of the core competencies framework, I think, illuminate how NACADA and the Professional Development Committee has enacted the commitment to strategic goal number 2, which is that professional development for the association. And what's happening now is members across the association are thinking about, how do I operationalize the core competencies, right? We have things at the association level, like the core competencies webinar that took place last May, and a cadre of consultants available to work with campuses on core competency development. Things are happening at the regional level as well. 3 regions, regions 2, 5, and 7, will have core competency focused presentations at their regional conference this year. You can even look at the slide that you're looking at right now is something that I developed for my campus advisors specifically, right? So at the local level, I wanted my staff to have a way to enact the competencies. This rubric gave them a chance, individual advisors, a chance or a way to think about their work in the context of each of the competencies. What's my personal philosophy of advising is supplemented with the notion that I may already be applying and using the competencies in my advising work, and that there may be or may need to be things that I could change, add, or enhance in my work as it relates to the competencies. You know, once an advisor walks through this checklist, it should be easy to identify how they're currently using the competencies in their work, as well as identifying areas for growth. So I think we'll advance the slide now back to Karen, I believe.
Yes, thank you, Brody. So I think when we're, the message we'd like to get across in this town hall and to open up the conversation when we get to our Q&A is really in a framework of the need for members to be vocal about what their needs are. We all, as volunteers, are looking at our experience, and we're looking at things through the lens of what we bring to the table. And while there is certainly a diverse collection of leaders involved in NACADA, we are only as good as what we hear from the membership. And I think, again, to use the analogy of our students, if we as professionals operate only within the framework of our own our own scope and don't look at data that we receive back from our students. We don't look at assessment that we receive from our students. We never question their satisfaction with the experiences that we have. They are unlikely to be satisfied with their experience because we're not responsive to them. So in the framework of that as a mindset, we strongly encourage you to think about the role of yourself as a member, as a consumer, and as a participant in professional development, in that you are the value of your membership is in what you get out of it in moving your students toward that student success. So Brody, if you could take us through the next slide and transition us into our next part of the town hall.
Absolutely. So if we move to the next slide, that town hall discussion, just a quick reminder, you have two ways now to interact with the panel today. The first is through that Google form that you can access through the event link. And we certainly know that some of you may prefer to interact with us that way, as Carrie mentioned earlier in the session today. We'll leave that link available for about 3 weeks. But right now, we also have the opportunity to use the question and answer function here through our Zoom, the Zoom medium. You can certainly just click on that Q&A, submit your question, and I'll be moderating some discussion and asking panelists to respond to some of the questions here. We have received a couple of questions, but we certainly would encourage participants right now to submit any questions that you may have related to today's topic. And so I think I'll go ahead and open up with this question here, and that is, can a few of you talk about how volunteering for the organization can contribute to the advising competency and ultimately to realizing the mission of student success? Does anybody want to handle that first question?
I'd be happy to jump in. I think when we think about the opportunity to volunteer and the role that we take, part of that is certainly in what the association as a whole gets out of our volunteering. But I think the other opportunity that we get from that is to connect with colleagues who are in organizations, in institutions with which we might not otherwise have contact. Whether that's institutions that are very similar to our own, or whether that is in institutions that are very different from our own, but might be dealing with similar challenges. So if we think about, for example, I'm at a community college, and just about any open access institution, regardless of what type of institution they are, is going to have similar challenges to us in terms of advising and what it means to get to student success when many of our students are coming in at significant deficits, for example. So I think the connections that are made through volunteering often help me to expand the folks with whom I can connect when something comes up on my campus.
Does anybody else want to handle that question?
Brody, I'd be happy to join in. I couldn't agree with Karen more. And I also would say that the opportunities I've had personally to volunteer have enhanced my leadership development, have allowed me to grow in my organizational skills, in the opportunity to engage and help gather volunteers to create and execute an event. Those are all skill sets that we hope our students will learn. And as we start going through that growth development, it helps us further engage and encourage our students to get involved and engage with organizations that allow them to develop those types of leadership skills.
I just wanted to jump in real quickly and again echo what both Deb and Karen said, and say that for myself, just the expanse of tables that I've been able to sit at, whether it was again as a consumer and taking advantage of like Summer Institute or being at conference presentations, has been invaluable. But I would say the same thing too for being at the tables for committees and task forces, both at the regional, at the association level. One of my favorite quotes comes from Ira Glass, and he says, "Ideas come from being around other ideas." And just being around other voices and hearing what's happening on other campuses, but also being witness to the way that colleagues approach problem solving and troubleshooting has been really helpful to me in my role as an advising administrator.
Carrie, I just would add to that, right? This idea, so to me, right, the value of the advising communities, right? So finding people who are in like roles or dealing with like student populations. I've been active in the CUES advising community and the advising administration community. And I will tell you that volunteering and being involved in those specific communities has meant so much to the work I do back on my campus, right? I've just generated so many great ideas. A lot of the stuff that I've done in my role on my campus has been stuff that I'm able to pilfer or steal from great ideas happening in other areas. And I just can't stress enough, right? Once you become a part of those communities and integrate yourself either as a volunteer or as an active member, you start to really get back some things that are going to help you be successful on your own campus. Let's maybe move to another question. This question comes from an attendee. At the last town hall, we heard about the region review, and today Deb mentioned information from the region review survey informing the gap analysis. Deb, can you maybe say more about the connection between the two processes?
Sure, be happy to. I think one of the things, I serve a dual role, so I'm also at the regional review work group and I'm chairing PDC. So it was kind of an easy role to fall into in the sense of looking at those questions that were developed by another subcommittee for the regional review on the survey and understanding that they would generate ideas that could inform the gap analysis. So there are 2 or 3 questions in particular that their outcomes, specific to regional activities, but what members are looking for and wanting more of, or the ideas they're suggesting for engagement with the organization at the regional level, can certainly be fed into the overall gap analysis and should be. So we really did take a look at those 2 questions. So the hope is that by gathering all of this information, there's no one source that gives us everything. We have to collect these from a variety of sources. And so by gathering those questions, and the answers to those questions, we hope to better inform the overall gap analysis for the organization, not just from a regional perspective, but more broadly.
Yeah, even with this question, we've got a couple other questions coming through. I think getting kind of a really high sky view may be useful. Charlie, you want to step in and maybe address this question as well?
The region question or the
yeah, the region question, Charlie. Absolutely.
Okay. I'm sorry, Brody, I didn't see the question. I'm on my phone. I apologize.
No, that's okay. So, we were talking about the region review, and Deb was mentioning how we've tried to connect some of the issues and information we've gathered from the region review survey with the gap analysis, right? So, kind of identifying the connections between those 2 processes from maybe a loftier view within the association.
Absolutely. The real focus of the region review has always been from the very beginning, how are the regions meeting the needs of our members, and how are we meeting the professional development and needs towards student success and all of those pieces. And so I think as we look at that, we cannot do any type of review of anything within the association without always going back to how are we better serving our members wherever they may be. And so as we look at the region division setup as it's organized at this time, one of the big pieces is, are we organized in the best way to meet 15,000 members compared to when we had 7,000 members? And so how do we do that, and how do we ensure that we provide that? Also bringing into that, how do state liaison groups help? How do allied members groups help within the regions? So how do all those fit together? Because all of those come together to really form a region. Within each region, you've got state groups, you've got allied groups, And so they all become a part of that big picture of the association from a global perspective.
Thanks, Charlie. I appreciate that. We've got another question from a panelist or from a participant. What's the process for publishing with NACADA, and how does membership contribute or aid advisors looking to publish on advising topics? Karen, you want to start with that one?
Sure. So one of the great things about the association is that while a lot of our work centers around practice, there's also a wide range of publishing that happens within the association. And I will say that the process is a little bit different depending upon which area of publishing you're interested in getting into. So for example, there are things as simple as, and maybe simple is the wrong word to use, but as direct as a book review, where you select a book, you write a book review, and it is published online. Other areas have, to the other end of the extreme, are our two journals, which are peer-reviewed journals and are go through the peer review process in the same way that other peer-reviewed journals do, with submissions returned to you, blind review, those kinds of things. In addition, there are other methods of spaces in the middle. For example, Academic Advising Today, which is much more about practice, but is an academic article in the framework of practice. And so each one of these different venues, and those are just a few. There are also pocket guides. There are also books, book length works that come out of the association. And each one of these has a bit of a different process depending upon the timelines that things take. For example, a book might take 2 years to get from original concept to publication, where a book review, most of the work is done independently by the author, and it's simply put to publish when it's done. One of the things that's really great about the association as well is that there's support for folks who are beginning the writing process. For example, we have new virtual writing groups up and running. So if you are unclear on how to get started, but you know that maybe you've always been a strong writer and you're not sure how to translate that sort of graduate school writing into a professional writing, you can start to participate in those virtual writing communities so that you can get underway with working on your own research, working on your own writing skills in a way that's collaborative, that is not in any way competitive. And so I think there's a lot of ways to get involved. What I would encourage anyone who's interested in publishing to think about is what kind of publishing you want to do. Are you interested in research? Are you interested in more practice or something in the middle? And one of the great spaces that you might look for if you're at one of the regional if you attend a regional conference, is to look for the Writing for NACADA session that's offered at every regional conference, and it is a great way to get a full view of the expanse of opportunities for writing within the association. And I'll say for myself, the writing with NACADA has been one of my favorite things that I've done, and I think part of it is because you know that what you're contributing outlasts you. So I may, not have a leadership position after this year, in that my term as president will end. But the work that I've put into writing materials will still be on people's shelves. And I think that makes me feel like I've contributed beyond sometimes work that's done in committees. For me, that's very fulfilling.
Karen, that's great. Thank you so much. I think that provides a really good overview. So our next question is, I'd like to volunteer in the advising communities as much as I can, and that currently this person says, NACADA members can join up to 4 communities. However, some communities are more active than others, and they might be interested in more than 4 topics. Is there a possibility to be able to join more communities in the future? Megumi, you said you might want to take this?
Sure. What I thought the way that I would respond to this basically is that NACADA has many various different opportunities. And so your advising communities, I think someone has likened it to kind of selecting a major. So kind of having different areas of interest that you maybe overlap with others and can work with others on. I don't think there is an effort, and everyone else, please correct me if I'm wrong, to add more advising communities, because to be honest, if you are in very active advising communities, you might have a lot of email traffic, you might be highly involved. But beside that, there are also a ton of different other volunteer opportunities throughout the organization that you can get involved in. And so maybe we can talk about some of those.
Sorry. Does anybody else want to handle that one?
I think I'd just add that there was a question in there about adding additional advising communities, being involved in more than 4. And the thing that I would add is just that there's a difference between the communities of which you are an official member and the communities in which you can be engaged. And so being an active member is really about being a voting member. And so you can vote for the leadership of that committee and that kind of role, but you can certainly add yourself to listservs, to Facebook groups, to Twitter chats, to all of those things for as many communities as you're interested in being engaged with. And if you are able to go to the annual conference, you are by no means limited in what you can attend. So I think there's sometimes a misconception about what your level of involvement can be beyond those 4. Because I think the 4 is where you're able to vote. But beyond that, you are welcome to be engaged in as much or as little as you see fit.
I'm going to move to a research question, because I believe we have Wendy on as a panelist now, Wendy Troxel, and she'll be able to speak to this specifically. But folks, we have an attendee who's asked, I want to contribute to research about academic advising. And specifically, are there things, is NACADA spearheading programs or resources to help its members develop social science methods, quantitative methods in research? And I'll let you take this, Wendy.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Happy to. Yeah, lots going on. Great synergy and collaboration between the NACADA Research Committee and the Center for Research. The Research Committee is working, the Research Committee has for years overseen the grant process, the research grant process. And so that's available on the website. That kind of assumes that you're pretty fully up and running with research research processes and know how to write a grant proposal. But the committee and the center are also working on a series of little skills modules, little 15-minute how-to modules on a whole range of topics. Our first one is up on the Research Center website. I think the tab is Research Skills, and that's by Peter Hagen on how to kind of an overview of humanities research. We're currently working on 3 additional ones that are kind of almost in the can. One on overview of social science designs that Kiana Shiroma has put together, one on using Mendeley, and in collaborative, how to collaborate on research projects that Keith Proctor has put together, and one on bringing theory to practice that Rich Robbins has put together. And we've got other ones in the works, like what up with ethics research and human subjects research, and how to find things on my topic. So, and then we're also kind of percolating on some e-tutorials on research skills. And so lots going on that will also contribute to both virtual and face-to-face professional development on getting involved with the scholarship of advising. So hope that's helped, but shoot me a note if you need more.
Thanks so much, Wendy. Our next question. One of the things I connect with professional development is not only the progression of our own knowledge and learning, but also to increase our professionalism in the eyes of people outside of our advising field. for example, faculty, administrators. Is this being considered during this gap analysis, or would it be considered a separate task? Deb, you want to take this one?
Sure, thanks, Brody. Absolutely, this is being considered during the gap analysis because that is a prominent issue for many advisors across our globe at this point is, validating the work that they do and how it contributes to student success, both broadly and specifically on their campus, and getting involved in professional organizations like NACADA, like this organization, that allow us to develop our skills. So absolutely opportunities to provide members with talking points, allowing them to learn how to unpack their experiences and present them to administrators and faculty in professional ways is a part of what's coming up that I certainly am seeing in what we're reviewing right now. So we'll absolutely be including that type of information going forward for individuals.
Anybody else want to add to that? Okay, that's good. That silence is definitely sending me a message to move to the next question. So this comes from the Moraine Valley Community College Advisors. They said, we run professional development activities for 23 advisors. Does the association have a list of those running professional development opportunities at other colleges that we could connect with and potentially share resources? Does anybody want to handle that question?
I'm not sure that it's exactly what they're looking for. But I'm wondering if what they might want to take a look at is some of the state drive-ins or the affiliates. I think those are both spaces that we sometimes forget that there are low-cost professional development opportunities. The other thing that I would say is that there's a lot available online, both before and after annual conferences and regional conferences. And one of the things that I've found valuable when I wasn't able to attend a session, even if I was at a particular event, is to look through the materials that are available, find the folks who are doing work that I think might be helpful to my institution, and reach out directly. So that I don't think the association is necessarily using its time well if we try to curate every professional development that's being done around the world for advisors. But I think often you can find that in the catalog of offerings at the association's meetings. And I think that's a good way to find out what other institutions are doing, who you can learn from, who might be doing work that is solving challenges that you also have with regard to student success. So that would be my recommendation.
Yeah, I have definitely found the state associations, or within Indiana, we have even some institutional associations that are oftentimes willing to share those resources. It's just about reaching out, getting to the website, talking to leaders within those particular associations and finding out what else is happening. I think that's a great point, Karen.
Brody, I wanted to jump in on this quickly. I was wondering if the advising community listservs might be another way to go on this. I think there is help me out if I'm missing this, but I think there is a training and development advising community, and that might be a good way to go, especially if you're looking for other community colleges that have gone down this road in particular, or if you're just looking in general for folks who have embedded a really robust advisor development program on their campuses. I can imagine that would be a way to get more info on that.
Yeah, that's a pretty obvious spot that we all missed there. So I appreciate that, Carrie, absolutely. So this question comes from a participant. What activities offered through NACADA, in your opinion, has influenced your advising the most? I think that's a great question. Anybody want to take that?
I will absolutely jump in and say there are really two areas. One is probably more obvious than the other. So the one that I think is more obvious is my primary connection within advising communities has always been within advising transfer students. And that has been, for me, that has been a theme throughout my career at different institutions, different institutional types. I've always worked with transfer students. And so that has been a space that has always been my sort of my spot that I go back to, is the advising transfer students community. That I think has been a space where, regardless of what the issue was, I could find someone who was dealing with things similar to what I was dealing with. The other one that's maybe a little bit less obvious is through being a mentor in ELP, the Emerging Leaders Program. I think it's less so influenced my advising and more so influenced my professional development. I don't know that it's made me more effective at advising students, but I think it's made me more conscious of my own development and keeping myself fresh and keeping myself mindful of my own future development in a way that, as you think of that as the role of the mentee to gain and grow from the ELP program. But I found that it was just as important for me as a mentor to really be mindful about thinking about professional development planning and thinking about goal setting and those kinds of things. And I think that translates certainly to any work that you're doing, but certainly to advising.
I'm sure there are some other panelists who'd love to share their thoughts on this question.
I can jump in. From my perspective, again, back to the communities, mine was the probation, dismissal, and reinstatement community, because I was dealing with that significantly on my campus, and the resources that I gathered from my colleagues in that community were exceptionally helpful. Just in developing a more positive message when you're delivering not so positive news, and working with the student to help them understand that this is simply a bump in the road, not a forever state, and that so those messaging pieces were very important to my work on my campus. And also my opportunity to engage at the regional level and in a mentor-mentee relationship too was helpful to me to learn and grow myself. I remember I have done it a couple times, and I know the first time it was like, okay, did I do this one the way it should have been done? And like Karen, it was like I had growth opportunities there that I saw and things I could do differently, so that the next experience I felt was richer for both myself and for the mentee. So there's definitely advantages to that involvement that I've had specifically in those two areas.
Megumi, you want to jump in next?
Sure. Building off of what Karen and Deb said, my experience started off in peer advising and mentoring, and I found that a lot of times being in the right place at the right time really helps. So once I got involved, I was actually asked to do a webinar. And then shortly after that, I was asked to do, well, actually a ways after that, I was asked to teach a e-tutorial. And they always say that when you have to teach something, you learn the material so much better. And I found that to be completely true. And I was so inspired by the folks who signed up for the e-tutorial, and it put more energy back into me and made me feel like, wow, they're such an inspiration. They're trying so hard to put their programs together. And I felt like I gained so much from doing that. I would encourage people, if I may, just quick plug. If you're going to the conference, please go to the business meetings for the AC division, because that's the only way that you can actually step up and introduce yourself and say, hey, I'm interested. And a lot of times that's how you kind of get connected. So I would encourage you to do that if you're interested.
I like Karen, I want to speak about something that will feel really obscure, but I think that helped me tremendously as an academic advisor, and that was being a conference proposal reader, right? So when you first join the association, you start to think about, well, what do I have to contribute, and what can I learn? And reading all of the proposals for a regional conference or an annual conference, you just got such a rich idea of all of the things that were happening across advising interests, across institutions, across different roles. And I just found that to be really transformative. It kind of laser focused me on specific areas of interest, places where I felt like our institution was doing great work, places where I felt like I could contribute to the association in terms of my own expertise. And so sometimes I think even some of those smaller involvements can really have an impact on the work that we're doing within the advising communities. Let's move to this. Let's move to this last, the last question that I see here on our end, and that's someone who's interested in breaking into advising, but's been closed out of one of our Region 1 conferences here, looking to get more involved within the association. So what other ideas might the panelists have besides webinars and reading NACADA publications to give this person a better advantage to get into advising as a profession?
I mean, I'd go back to something I mentioned earlier about connecting with presenters from the conference. You should be able to see either via the schedule itself, if it's posted online, but also you can follow the back channel on Twitter for most of the regional events. And if you're doing that and you can see who's presenting on stuff that sounds interesting to you, you can make that connection. You also could attend another regional conference if that's within your means to travel, depending upon where you are in Region 1. I think you mentioned Massachusetts. It's not too far to Region 2, which is in Atlantic City, and there's not a ton of space left there, but there is a little bit. But I think it's the question of sort of making those connections. And if you're looking to break into advising, I think part of what you benefit from an in-person meeting is that networking piece, but you can do that just as effectively by engaging with someone directly about the work that they presented at the conference to say, I wasn't able to attend your session, but I was really impressed with what you had there. Is there any way that we could chat about the work that you're doing? And I think that may be a good way to start breaking in a little bit. The other thing I would say is that if you are on a campus but not in advising, there's a whole wealth of opportunities on your own campus to make connections with advisors, even if it's not with advising. And what I would say when I mean that in terms of the department. So thinking through who on your campus who's in advising might be willing to go out and grab a cup of coffee and talk about advising as a field. Is there anyone on your campus who's attending the regional meeting where you might be able to pick their brains afterward? I think there are some, when you're not yet in the field, I think there's a really good benefit to making those one-on-one connections, especially if you have some institutions in mind where you might like to start your advising career. And to think through how you make those connections and how you make them in a way that's meaningful to you in terms of advisor development, but also meaningful to you in terms of setting yourself up for what your next phase might look like professionally.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Karen. I know on our campus we have advising fellow programs where folks can volunteer even to work in particular units, and they get training, and we can give them maybe a smaller number of advisees to work with as long as we've got approval from other areas. But I think your ideas are spot on. So we've been talking around this for a little bit, but there is a new question that's come up about how members can participate, contribute, be seen, even if they're not actually able to attend conferences in person. This, I think, is always an issue or a concern from members and staying engaged if you're not able to attend conferences. Does somebody want to handle that question here initially?
I can jump in from things that we've been able to encourage people to do, because we do frequently run into this where people cannot afford to either take the time or have the funds to be supported to attend the conferences. Again, Brody, like you said, reading conference proposals is a great way to keep getting involved. Volunteering to be on steering committees in some form or fashion, either through the communities, the advising communities, is a great way to engage, because a lot of them are doing now Zoom meetings. So it's less, well, it's more technology driven, and you're able to better connect with people through those meetings. And so those steering committee opportunities are a great way to get involved, and there's no requirement if you're on those communities steering committees that you'd actually have to be in attendance at the conference. It's always a great thing to try to do, but it's not a requirement. So those are ways you can influence things within the organization through the committee structure. The other thing is getting involved in any of the other boards or committees throughout the organization. Again, doing Zoom meetings, engaging, doing some of the work. That's how we're doing a lot of the work with the gap analysis. We've got a group of people that won't necessarily all be getting together. We're doing this all electronically through meetings that way. So I'd encourage people to reach out. I think a lot more is available now to us to help engage our membership, like these virtual town halls is a prime example. So I would encourage individuals that way. I'm sure others have other ideas too.
Yeah, I on the undecided and exploratory listserv, right? And there are plenty of people on that listserv that are active, involved, gathering resources, getting information that can help them on the campus, and even able to contribute based on what they're doing on their own campuses. So I do think that thinking about things virtually and really reaching out and connecting to those advising communities is a great first step, no doubt. But there are volunteer opportunities everywhere, whether that's reading, steering committees like you mentioned, Deb. There's no question all of those pieces are possible.
Brody,
So,
if I can jump in for just 1 second to add one additional thing. We mentioned earlier about research and writing, and just being mindful that most of the writing work that you're doing, in fact, I would say all of the writing work that you would be doing, all happens in the comfort of your own home or office or whatever. And so if you have any interest at all in getting involved in, I'm going to use the word scholarship broadly, but I mean it across the spectrum of that writing. That's absolutely a way to become connected to the association, and to be, to use the words of the question, to be seen, even though you might not physically be there. The engagement with writing is a wonderful way to do that.
Thanks, Karen. That is an excellent point, So we have one more question I think we want to hit at before we close things out today. But we have a person who's interested in pursuing graduate studies and would love to connect with those currently doing so. Has there ever been consideration for some type of community to support this? I think, Wendy, we're going to have you tackle this topic.
Absolutely, and Karen, you warmed my heart with that one. You're absolutely right. Yeah, there was actually a doctoral student interest group when we were commissions and interest groups, and when we moved to advising communities, that interest group was merged with the advising graduate and professional students, and I think Shelley Price Williams is the chair of that one now, and is that group has both lenses, if you advise graduate students and professional students, and if you are one. But there are a number of you who are current doctoral students, want to be doctoral students, current master's students want to be master's students, who have a little different lens on that. So I'm actually about to form kind of an informal network. It's not an advising community at this point, but through the research committee, the research center, how can we support you in thinking about that? We've just announced the new PhD in academic advising that will start in the summer of 2020. The website is now open, and I think accepting applications. There's a lot of information on there, but there are a lot of other graduate programs and areas that you might be interested in. So if you're interested in being a part of kind of an informal support network, shoot me an email at wgtroxel@ksu.edu, and we will connect and form a little community of our own as well.
Thanks, Wendy. I'm going to kick it back to Carrie, who I think is going to wrap us up today. Thank you all for your participation, gang.
Yeah, we really appreciate you being able to join us today, and appreciate the questions and the thoughts that you put forward. Again, I just want to reiterate that Google form that's on the event page, particularly from the standpoint of what Deb was talking about earlier. You know, if you're thinking about the professional development, I know a lot of the questions that we had today got at, you know, what's there and what's maybe not there, and I think that's part of what we're looking at in terms of this gap analysis. So if if you have thoughts or questions about maybe what you might need to help you grow as a professional and really achieve that student success mission, please make sure that you go to that Google form, go to that event page, and share your feedback with us. We'd really appreciate it. So with that, I think we are about to sign off. Just a reminder that we do have some more virtual town halls happening in the future, and so we hope you're able to join us for those as well. But again, thanks to you, thanks to the panelists and folks who were able to jump in today, and thanks to our colleagues at the executive office who were there to help us facilitate this. So everyone have a great Friday and be well.